from Minerva, and I'm gonna link my personal profile down below in case you wanna follow me here. I am so glad you're joining me for this video. We are gonna make the Wilder gown. Before we get into that, I did just want to mention that if you haven't signed up for a Minerva account yet, what are you waiting for? You get a sweet little discount for signing up, and it's totally free. It opens up a lot of opportunity to connect with other makers. Another great way to take advantage of this website is by following us. Click that little button above this video beside our name so that we can show up on your feed so you don't miss any information coming from Minerva. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below on this video so I can get back to you. Alright, so the Wilder gown. I have had this pattern on my lust list for so long. I finally got to it, and I made 3 different versions. So the first one you're going to see is the top version. I made this in a double cotton gauze in this soft green color. And for the top, you're gonna need up to 2.5 meters depending on your size and what kind of fabric you're using. And the matching thread for this is Gutermann 556. I made the short dress in this viscose challis with this really pretty floral print. It's a navy and pink colorway. I used 2 meters of this fabric. And the color matched thread is the Gutermann 387. And finally, the long, luxurious version. I used Atelier Brunette designer fabric in this granito print, and this is the chestnut colorway. I used 3.5 meters of this fabric. And I use Gutermann thread number 934. This pattern is quite simple to make, and I think a beginner would handle it just fine. The first thing we're going to do after we cut all our pieces out is take those 2 front pieces and stitch them right sides together, but not all the way. Well, not all the way. We're gonna stitch with a basting stitch from the top down to that notch. Then set your machine back to a regular stitch length of about 2.5 and back stitch and forward stitch all the way down to the bottom. We are using a 5/8 inch seam allowance throughout this whole pattern. Once you have that stitched, we're going to open up that seam, meaning just pressing it flat, and we're gonna take each side and tuck it under and then edge stitch it down, kind of like hemming. Now we're going to take a seam ripper and rip out those basting stitches where we did at the top of the fabric down to the notch. If you want to add some extra reinforcement, you can do a bar tack across that seam. Now we're going to take our 2 sleeves and pin the right sides together with the bodice of the front part of the sleeve. So we want the front part of the sleeve right sides together with the front of the bodice. Then we can take the back bodice piece and do the similar thing. Now we're going to stitch down the side seam and underarm of this bodice. I like to start at the bottom of the bodice and then go up towards and out of the hem because I like my seam allowance to be towards my sleeve. Before you do that, you can also do a memory hem. This is something I like to do. So I just take my iron and press my hem in place and then unfold it and do my stitching so that then when I go to actually hem it, things are already ironed and I don't have to iron in the round. And then you can actually hem after you have your sleeve sewn. Okay, now we're gonna do the neck. So we're gonna take that top edge and fold it to the wrong side by 1/2 inch. Now we're gonna fold it down another 2 inches and edge stitch it in place, making sure we're back stitching at the beginning and end. Now you can sew another row of stitching 1 inch above that edge stitching we just did. Next, we're going to take our 2 tie pieces and attach them along the short sides, right sides together. Use that 5/8 inch seam allowance and then trim away the excess. Then we're going to fold it together lengthwise, right sides together, stitch all the way down that long side. Trim the seam allowance and then turn it right side out and press. You can actually stitch one of the short sides down too if you'd like. You can then finish either both ends or the other end of the tie depending on how you stitched originally, and thread it through the neck opening, the bottom neck opening that you just made, and we're gonna leave that little bit on the top, kind of like a paper bag effect. Now, if you're making the top, all you have to do is hem the bottom by folding it up a 1/2 inch and another 1/2 inch, stitching it in place, and you're done. If you are doing the skirt, what you're going to do is take your tiers. So for the short skirt, you need the 2 tiers, and then for the longer skirt, you need an additional 3 tiers. So we're going to start by taking 2 of the tiers, attaching them along the short sides, right sides together, stitching them in place, finishing the seams. For the second tier, if you're doing the long dress, you're going to take the remaining 3 pieces and stitch them right sides together all along to form a loop. So, short version, 1 loop, long version, 2 loops. I'm also going to hem the bottom of the dress. So in the short dress version, that's the bottom of the first tier, the only skirt, and in the long dress version, that's the bottom of the larger tier where my hem is going to be. I'm going to hem those ahead of time because it's easier than when everything's all put together and I have all that bulk and I'm trying to wrestle with it through the machine. Next, we can gather. If you are not familiar with gathering, there are many different ways, but I'm going to go through how I like to do it. I'm going to quarter both of these loops as well as the parts that they're getting attached to. So the bottom of the bodice as well as the bottom of that first tier when I'm making the long skirt. So I'm going to run 2 lines of basting stitches, one on the inside of my seam allowance, about 1/2 inch, and then one on the outside of my seam allowance at about 3/4 inch. I am going to do this piece by piece, so meaning I'm not going to do the entire loop in one basting stitch. I'm going to separate it into the pieces where the seams are because I don't want to cross those seams with my basting stitches. So for the first tier, I'm going to do the 2 rows of basting stitches on the one skirt piece, and then on the other skirt piece another 2 rows. And similar on the bottom tier with the 3 different skirt pieces. Then it's just a matter of attaching things, matching up the notches, and gathering to fit and making things nice and even and stitching it down. So then once you have all your tiers done, you're already hemmed. So that's the end of the dress tutorial. Put it on and rock it. Thank you so much for watching, liking, sharing, saving, following, and being part of this community. I cannot wait to see what you create. Happy making!